Okay, thank you all for coming this morning. Today my sermon topic is humility in front of the will of God. So kind of the inspiration for this message actually came from something I think about often, and that is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when he is praying and he is talking to God, and he is saying, "Not as I will, but as you will." And I don't know why. I mean, obviously, it's a very pivotal moment and a deep moment, and I think a moment that may be easy to relate to in some ways. But I don't know. I think about it often. Not as I will, but as you will. But this particular moment in the Bible also has a very maybe different meaning or deep meaning for us as unificationists, because most Christians believe that Jesus' main purpose for coming was to go to the cross. So when Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Not as you will, but as I will, please let this cup pass from me," if you talk to most Christians about this, they don't really have a clear understanding of what Jesus was talking about in that moment. Many will say it was a moment of the flesh, it was a moment of weakness. But because we understand that God's purpose in creating a foundation in the Old Testament wasn't just so that he could send Jesus to die. He could have sent Jesus to die at any point. He didn't have to go through thousands of years of patience and disappointment and working with central figures and doing all the things that happened in the Old Testament just for that to happen. It could have happened at any point. So we know that Jesus wasn't looking for a way to avoid the path of the cross. He was looking for a way to be able to do what God had sent him to do. He was looking for another path, but it didn't seem like one was possible at that point, at that time. All the foundation that God had prepared for Jesus had been wrecked, especially with John the Baptist. He was asking God for the possibility of a better path. It wasn't about lacking trust in God. It wasn't about fear of pain. And it wasn't about personal preference. So that's Jesus. In our life, we also have these moments, not as I will, but as you will. Struggling with trying to understand or to try to discover what is God's purpose in my life at this time. But we struggle with a lot of other things, not necessarily trying to find a way to the path that God has prepared, but we struggle with fear of pain. We struggle in trusting God. Does God really care about me? Does God really have my best interests in mind? Does God really care about my life? We struggle to believe that God has a will for my life, and we struggle to let go of our own ideas of how we think things should be. We have our personal preferences. I'd like for my life to be this way, and I'd like for my situation to be this way. We'd like to feel that we have a sense of control in our life, and it can be very difficult to let go of that. It's very much a personal challenge for me. Maybe this is why I think about this verse. Because for me, personally, I have a very hard time. Like if I said in my mind, I want to see something happen, or I want to do something, or I want to see certain results in my life, it's very hard for me to accept that things may not work out the way, no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I sacrifice or how much I invest. I can't guarantee that things will work out the way that I want, and I don't like that. Frankly speaking, I'd like to be able to set an idea, work hard, and then expect it to see it happen. And sometimes it does. That's wonderful to be able to have that experience, and many times it doesn't. And at the same time, it's fair. It's not a bad thing to work hard for your dreams, right? It's not a hard thing, and I think that's actually a really good thing. And one of the things that we understand from the divine principle is that we shouldn't expect God to do everything for us. that there's a certain responsibility that we have. And in reality, when we look at the figures in the Bible and people that God has worked through, he's expected them to fulfill something. You know, he couldn't just do it all for them and just, make it happen. He had to rely on us human beings to do our part, to overcome a resentment, to follow through on a promise that we made. And if we didn't, then we set God back. In a way, God had to depend on human beings to be able to move his providence forward. And if that person didn't work out or that person didn't work out, then he ended up having to work with somebody else. But you lose time, right? You lose foundation when those things happen. So we need to find some kind of a balance. We can't expect just through our own efforts, just through our hard work, that we can make things happen. Sometimes we can. But we also can't put everything in God's hands and just say, well, God, you do it all. I'm done. Probably a good balance of the two is probably what God is looking for. But it also emphasizes that, if things aren't working out the way we want, if my hard work is not maybe getting the results I'm looking for in my life, it might not be a bad idea to recognize that doors are shutting, that maybe that way is not the way God wants me to go, and maybe look for a door that's opening somewhere else, maybe somewhere I wasn't expecting. So I've had this interesting experience recently. Many of you know we've been trying to get solar panels installed onto the church, right? And obviously they're not there. Thank you for not making a big deal out of that. It definitely bothers me. I'm sure it bothers some of you as well. But 2 years ago, almost to this date, we started that process. And, we're not there, but, we applied for a grant from the city, and the city gave us a grant to install the solar panels, $50,000, which covers about half the cost. And we put a deposit down of $10,000 to secure, show them that we're going to follow through. So we still owe about $40,000. And when we had our savings and we didn't have the new parsonage, we had that money. It wasn't a huge problem, although we were hoping to get some money from the government, the federal government, to help cover it. But that's a very slow process, and we wouldn't see the money for a couple of years. And long story short, I was in a place about a month ago where I was like, we can't do this. We don't have an extra $40,000 to, spend on putting in these solar panels. So I was at the point where I was going to email the company and say, look, we just appreciate your working with us these last 2 years. Thanks for your patience. But, we can't follow through on making this happen. But I think it was Peggy's suggestion, or I don't know, maybe I just came up with the idea, I don't know. But I decided to write the city again and just say, look, you guys, you gave us this grant. We really appreciate it. I'm at a place now with our financial situation that the only way forward that I can think of to do this would be if you were willing to extend another grant to us to help us cover the rest of the amount owed. And to my surprise, they got back to me and they said, maybe we can. Maybe. They said maybe. They didn't say yes. They said, send us this paperwork and we'll see. And I've been working with the city for the last 2 years, so they know that we've been trying to do this and how frustrating it's been. And so I think they felt a little bit of, what's the word? They felt bad for us. They were like, this should have been done a long time ago. It wasn't that big of a project. And I was like, yeah, what can I say? So I sent the paperwork, and about a week later, I wrote them again, and I said, look, I'm a little bit worried that if we get the approval from the city to build these solar panels, then I'm going to have to turn around and say, oh, we can't afford it. So I was like, if you could give me a yes or a no, I would appreciate it. And so they got back to me a couple days later, and they said, yes, we will cover the rest of the It's about 38,000. So we still don't have solar panels on the building, but we're getting really close, and now we can actually afford it. That's good. I was really humbled in that moment. I felt really undeserving because, in a sense, we kind of created the situation. It's not their fault, that we decided to buy a new parsonage and we didn't have the money for the solar panels anymore. But still, they responded in a very supportive way, and I didn't realize when we started this whole process all the different roundabout things that we would have to do, and then in some ways having to go back to the city and asking for more money felt really yeah, it was awkward. I'll give you that for sure. It was awkward. It was humbling, but it was kind of one of those situations where, hey, the door's all closed. I didn't have any hope anymore. I didn't want to let go of the solar panels. I've been working on it for 2 years. There's been a lot of work, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of I think most people are excited about it for one purpose or another, whether it's saving money on utilities or the environmental impact, or just being able to see, we have these solar panels. How cool is that? So I didn't want to give up on that, but I didn't see another way. So it kind of was the experience for me. Wow, if one door closed, maybe another door opens somewhere else. Doesn't hurt to try. So that's one point I wanted to make today. Another point that's kind of related is that it's really easy to, in our lives, look at results or fruits that other people have in their lives, and to be envious or to be or get down on ourselves. I wish I had, that money or that family or that optimism or that respect and recognition that the other person has, or that knowledge. These are things that are not bad things to want for ourselves. These are things that I think most of us want to see in our lives. But we also have to temper that with asking ourselves, what does God want for my life? And what does God want from my life? And somewhat of an understanding that God isn't going to work in somebody else's life necessarily the same as that God is going to work in my life. I think that's an important thing to know. And that's very clear in the Bible. Whether we look at the verse about the potter choosing how to mold the clay, or the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, and the father and the prodigal son and the obedient son all play very different roles in the story. God is working through each of them. Or the verses in Corinthians where it talks about the people of the church the church, each having a different role, like a body part, like the ear or the mouth. You've heard these things before. I didn't feel it was necessary to recite them word for word. Similarly, my life is not going to look exactly the same as somebody else's life, even if I would really like it to. Therefore, we have to be humble in front of God in the sense of what He may wish to see happen in our life. We can spend our whole life chasing after what I want, and a lot of people do. But if we believe in God and we believe that God has a purpose for my life, or that God has a purpose that encompasses the world, then we can't be satisfied with just seeking after what I want in life. Because God also has something that He may want from my life, or He may want for my life. And humility is a hard thing to actually in reality, practice. It's easy to fake being humble, right? We see it all the time, fake people all the time. I had this really interesting experience. I was dropping off the kids at martial arts, and I parked, just like I normally would. And I distinctly remember parking, and there was no car in front of me. No big deal. It's just like something I remembered. So I go in, hanging out with the martial arts, came back out, there was a car parked in front of me. Also, not a big deal. Happens all the time. But I get in the car, and I'm just waiting for the boys to come out, and I see this guy coming around, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, did I do something? I'm just sitting in the car, right? The car's not even on or anything. And he comes out, he knocks on the window, and I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? And he's like, did you see that the car in front of you is touching your car? And he was like, did you move your car forward when you got in? And I'm like, no. And I got out and I looked, and sure enough, the cars were touching. No damage to my car. Their license plate was a little wrinkled. And then I'm talking to this guy, and a lady comes out from the restaurant, and she's like, it was her car, and she's like, is this your car? Did you run into my car? And I was like, no, I got here, there was no car in front of me, and now your car is there, and you're asking me if I hit it? And the whole situation was just really weird. And I'm just like, look, there's no damage to my car. I'm just gonna leave. Like, we're fine. And they just watch me drive off. And the whole circumstance was so weird. And I got to thinking of it when I left. I was like, was that all like some staged thing? They hit my car and then waited until I came out to ask me about it and ask me if I hit their car. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand. But it was just a really weird situation. And for me, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, if you did touch somebody's car, why don't you just go up, leave a little note, or go up to them and say, hey, like, I tapped your car. Sorry. If you feel the need to trade information or whatever, just let me know. I don't know. That's the way I would have dealt with it. But they orchestrated this whole weird, I mean, that's the only conclusion I could come to, is they orchestrated this weird thing. And I just drove away feeling like icky. Like, what is going on? What is this fakery, going, so, that's just a recent experience I had. I mean, it's a light experience. Many of you have had experiences where people were fake with you, and they cause real damage, right? Cause real damage, real repercussions in your life, not being able to trust people and things like that. That's the reality of life, and it's really sad. But, my situation was very minor, but it was recent, so, I just wanted to share that. The point is that humility can easily be faked. And even in front of God, we try to fake our humility. Oh, God, I want you to work in my life and stuff. But, it's not easy to be really honest with God and to really make that promise, knowing that if God asks something from me, that I'd actually be willing to do it. I'd actually be willing to sacrifice something, or sacrifice maybe some personal preference that I have or fear that I have, to actually follow through with maybe a direction that God would like me to go in my life. It's a very different kind of commitment. And I think God knows the difference, but generally God doesn't call us out on our maybe a little harsh thing to say, but our fakery sometimes. Because it's easy to say nice words. We do it to one another all the time. But I believe that there is one way that we can express like an authentic humility before God. Not that there's only one way, but I think one way that we see it manifested in people's life is when we live in gratitude, which is why Chelsea's song today was perfect. And what you said, too. When we live in gratitude, it's a recognition, it's an expression of me understanding what God has done in my life and acknowledging it and being grateful for it. Not to Not to say that maybe things haven't gone the way we wanted them to go, or we don't have things to complain about, right? Of course we have things to complain about. But it's an expression of gratitude for the things that we do have and the ways that we recognize God must be working in my life, even if I don't see it. Because if God is a loving God, that we say he is, and God is interested in each of our lives like we say he is, then we have to acknowledge it somehow. But if we say those things, but we walk around complaining and bitter about every little thing that happens in our life, then we can't really say that, I recognize God working in my life somehow. The two things are a little bit contradictory. Humility and gratitude, they go hand in hand. So I want to share some quotes. This is from a speech from our True Father founder, and he just shared a little bit on this topic, and I just wanted to, share a little bit with you. He said, "When you think of all these things, you realize that every cell in your body is totally indebted to your parents. Have you ever thought of that? If you converted all the service your parents gave you into dollars, the debt would be so great, you could never repay it. In many cases, American young people only think that their parents don't understand them and talk about the generation gap. And then they act like they just appeared from heaven without causing any trouble to anyone. Adults, we do this too. Many times, young people think their parents are only bothering them, and later in life put them away in senior citizens' homes with the attitude that no one needs them. But the universe doesn't work that way. The world must be harmonized. If each individual only claimed things for his own selfish benefit and demanded his rights, then he would never parallel the universal way. It is a law of nature that while you are growing up, you are deeply indebted to your parents. And after you are grown and responsible, then you repay that debt by taking care of your parents. Therefore, what can you be proud of when you reflect on your past life? You can be proud that you are deeply indebted to your father and mother, and recognize that you are deeply indebted to nature. You can appreciate the water, sun, and air, for without them you could not survive even for 5 minutes. You must be thankful for the world of plants and the animal kingdom. When God looks down and sees man's very self-centered behavior, he feels that he certainly did not create this entire world just to serve man's greed. Do your clothes belong to you? You wear jewelry and ornaments, but who do those things belong to? When you are proud and boastful and think that you can be independent, nature laughs when it looks at you, knowing that you can never exist all by yourself. The universe would never show any gratitude to the person who has no thankfulness. But if a person knows his position of indebtedness to nature and his parents, then the world gladly harmonizes with him. Then he can think that an oasis in the desert is created simply for him, and how much gratitude would he show in that case? Suppose you were living in a barren desert, but woke one morning to see each beautiful aspect of nature being created just for you: sun rays, grass, trees, flowers, and so forth. How much ecstatic joy and gratitude would you feel then? Wouldn't you shout out in happiness if all of this appeared out of nothing one day? There was once a day when nothing existed, before God created anything. When God created each thing, he said it was good. But suppose that you as his child took more delight in each thing that he did than he did. Would he upbraid you, or would he be glad at the appreciation you show? God is eternal, existing from beginning to the end. So he has memories of all history and looks at you in historical perspective. Will God just comment that you were good, or would he remember and appreciate you in his heart? He will think that you are better than anyone in history for having so much gratitude. So if we think about it from this context, and we recognize that God is a loving God who remembers us and is trying to guide our lives, bringing people and circumstances into our lives, especially if we are seeking it, but even if we are not, the best way to show appreciation and humility before God is through our gratitude. I think it's the same with our own kids. As parents, you work hard, you invest into your children, or if you're young and you don't have kids yet, you will, I'm sure, have that experience someday. I know for me, one of my hopes is that my children will grow up and they will appreciate, right, the investments that we made into them, the sacrifices that we made, the difficult times that we got through thinking about our kids and how we wanted a better future for them. Every parent has these experiences. And we want for our children to grow up, and we hope that as they grow up, they will feel a deep sense of gratitude to their parents for what they have done. And even the things that they recognized were under the surface, maybe will never be talked about, will never ever be noticed or seen, that the parents did for the children. And I think that God is not so different. You know, we don't know all the things that God is doing in the world, and we don't know what the things that God might be doing in my life right now, or might be preparing in my life right now, or how God might be working through other people or through circumstances with me and with you in his mind. And some things maybe we do recognize, you know, certain events and certain things, and we can be grateful for that. But even, I think we need to also give God the benefit of the doubt too, and also live in gratitude, knowing that there's things that God's doing that we will probably never even recognize or be aware of. And a part of expressing that humility to God, the humility to the will of God, and reassuring God that we are with him, and we love him, and we want to walk with him, is by being grateful for the lives that we already have, and not being too frustrated about the things that we have yet to accomplish, or the things that we see in other people's lives that we wish we had. Yes, everybody wished they had millions of dollars. Yes, everybody wished that they were worldwide renowned and respected people. Everybody wants all these things. But the reality is that there are some things that we have, and there are things that we don't have, and it will always be that way. And so one way that we can really express our appreciation to God and our humility before the will of God, and to also let God know, hey, I'm ready. If you ever need to call on me for something, if you want to change the course of my life, I know that it would be out of love. And I want you to know that I would follow. And a part of that is by showing gratitude now. We think that God does the things he does because he wants to. Because God is omnipotent, right? God just does what he wants to. But this is one of the powerful things that the principle teaches us, is that God actually can't do a lot without cooperation from his children. And in some ways, God's hands are tied because of us. Because of our, of course we can look at central figures and figures over the years, but even in our own lives, our narrow-mindedness, our nearsightedness, our focus on our preferences, or our lack of trust, or our fear of getting hurt, how much of these things actually limit God from being able to work in our lives? So, in a sense, we can seek for what we want in life, but in searching for the answer to what God wants for our lives, the bigger question might be to ask ourselves, how might I be standing in the way of God working in my life through all those things I mentioned before? How can I get out of the way to let God work in my life more? This is a big reason why we set our goals for the year such as we did, because I have started feeling that my small-mindedness as a pastor probably getting in the way. And, in some ways kind of an insistence to do things a certain way or to do things myself is not long-term what God wants for this community. So that's why we kind of set these goals this year, to bring in new people that will help us to really take ownership of these ministries that are so important for the church well-being, so that God can work in this community in a way that he's not able to right now. I do believe that God has bigger dreams and hopes for this community than we have, and that what we've been able to accomplish. But maybe we need to step out of the way a little bit, allow for more freedom, allow for more ownership from other people. So this is why this family is coming and visiting later this month, because that is our hope to fulfill one of those goals. So we will see how that goes. So I hope that something in the message this morning resonated with you, or touched on something that in your soul that you've been thinking about. Some way in which maybe we are actually preventing God from working in our lives, or we are preventing God from working in the church, or some aspect of our life that in some ways, despite whatever difficulties we may be going through, that we can humble ourselves before God through living gratefully. And that's my message, and I'll offer a prayer. Good morning, our dearest Heavenly Parent. We're so grateful that our true parents have brought this teaching and understanding to us to really help us to understand that you are a parent first and foremost, and that you are working in our lives even when we don't appreciate it, even when we curse you or turn our backs on you. And even if we are trying to live with you, we won't see the things that you are doing, not everything. And I pray that no matter what challenges that we face in our life, we can always be striving to live gratefully, Heavenly Parent, that we can recognize that you are a parent, that you're never ceasing to extend your love and your guidance into our lives, even if we sometimes get in the way. Please help us to have the wisdom or the heart to open ourselves to receiving the love you have for us, and also open ourselves to expressing our gratitude to you for the wonderful people we have in our lives, for the wonderful families that we have, even if there's challenges there, Heavenly Parent, the community that we have, a worldwide connection of brothers and sisters, Heavenly Parent, good memories and the good experiences, Heavenly Parent, and many of which are a direct reflection of the efforts that you have made to touch our lives, Heavenly Parent. The fact that we can all be here this morning is such a blessing. And every moment of every day that we live in this world is an expression of the love that you have for us as your children. And I pray, Heavenly Parent, that we can acknowledge it and be grateful for it, and move away from the things that are holding us back and the things that are holding you back from being able to work in our lives. I thank you for this time, for this service, and all brothers and sisters here, and offer us our names as blessed families. Amen and adieu. Thank you.